This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Human rights and press freedom groups are denouncing Israel's attack on Nasser Hospital in Gaza Monday that killed at least 21 journalists, that killed at least 21 people, including 5 journalists. According to eyewitnesses, Israel carried out a double-tap strike on the hospital. In the initial strike, a drone hit Hussam al-Masri, a cameraman who worked for Reuters. Then another strike, minutes later, hit journalists and rescue workers who were responding to the initial strike. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed the hospital attack was a, quote, tragic mishap. But just hours later, Israeli forces killed a 6th journalist, Hassan Duhan, a well-known editor at Hayat al-Jadida. He was killed when an Israeli tank shelled a tent sheltering displaced people in Khan Yunis. Over the past 23 months, Israel's barred all foreign journalists from reporting inside Gaza while systematically killing Palestinian journalists. According to one count, Israel's killed at least 245 journalists. On Monday, Thibaut Brüten, the Director General of Reporters Without Borders, denounced Israel's attacks on journalists.
When and where is it going to end? Are we going to let the Israel Defense Forces continue the repeated killing of journalists? There is international law. There are guarantees that should be granted to journalists covering conflicts, and none of that seems to be applying. So we need to be very clear about the fact that none of the journalists that are allegedly terrorists are terrorists. They are professional journalists working for legacy professional media, like, for example, Reuters or, for example, AP.
In other news from Gaza, 3 more Palestinians have starved to death, bringing the total to at least 303. We're joined right now by Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory. She's joining us from Tunis, Tunisia. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Francesca Albanese. Can you start off by responding to the killing of at this point in the last day, 6 journalists, 5 of them in a double-tap strike on Nasser Hospital?
Thank you, Jaime. Yeah, of course. Look, in the situation of conflicts, targeting or killing journalists is unlawful. Journalists, as doctors and medical personnel and rescues, all those who have been killed in this attack are civilians. So killing them is unlawful. They are protected under international humanitarian law. However, here it's not an isolated incident. Journalists have been killed in such high numbers. Some say 200 have been documented. Al Jazeera speaks of 270 journalists killed. So there is a pattern of targeting and killing journalists that let us think that there is an intention behind it. There is a widespread and systematic attack against them, like there is a systematic and widespread attack against civilians. And this might qualify as also as a crime against humanity in and of itself. However, I want to remind everyone that we are on the 688th day of the assault against Gaza, which an increasing consensus denounces as genocidal, and there is famine, and there is this complete destruction of all landscapes in Gaza. So the question is, what are member states waiting exactly to intervene and stop this carnage?
And Francesca Albanese, you have said that there have to be response. You've called for sanctions against Israel. Could you talk about how those might work, especially as you mentioned the fact that state governments are not taking any action?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I would like people to understand this in the broader context of international law. No later than last year, the International Court of Justice has confirmed that Israel's presence in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem is unlawful, must be dismantled totally and unconditionally. And the General Assembly has also given Israel a very generous deadline of 1 year to do so, which will expire in a month from now. In the face of this, member states have an obligation not to aid and assist in any possible ways a state like Israel in maintaining the situation created by Israel's unlawful presence. So while it is abhorrent that they are not stopping Israel, this delay increases their level of responsibility, their violation of international law, and possibly their complicity with the crimes that Israel is committing. This is why my recommendations are for member states who do not want to incur in their legal responsibilities, and also out of humanity, to break the siege. Member states who have a port in the Mediterranean Sea must absolutely send their navies under their national flag with humanitarian aid and doctors, with food and baby formula, because 500,000 people, according to the United Nations, are really close to starvation. And but also, as we see the Sumud flotilla, so ordinary citizens jumping on boats and trying to do what member states are not doing, I feel that it's totally immoral and irresponsible to let individuals like this take this risk when it's a state obligations to break the siege. But also, it's time to cut ties with Israel. To cut trade, because this is also what the ICJ has reminded member states. They need to take all steps to prevent trade and investment relations that are assisting in the maintenance of Israel's unlawful presence. And we must recall that while Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, is also advancing, as I was saying in the beginning, annexation at an incredible speed. So there is no way out of this other than a firm and robust action from member states.
And I wanted to ask you, the Trump administration, instead of heeding your calls as the special rapporteur, have instead imposed sanctions on you, supposedly claiming that your naming of dozens of companies sort of profiting from the Israeli occupation and genocide in Gaza. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said, quote, Albanese's campaign of political and economic warfare against the United States and Israel will no longer be tolerated. Your response to these kinds of words from leaders of the United States?
Well, first of all, as a non-American, but as someone who has lived in the United States, I wonder how American people understand this, because of course it's a violation of the First Amendment, right? I mean, I've just done my job, which is a pro bono job. I've been requested by the United Nations to investigate and report on the most prominent violations of international law that occur in the occupied Palestinian territory. And I've simply stated facts according due process to businesses, say there is an economy of the occupation, and this is the reason why Israel has profited and has allowed private entities, arms manufacturers, even banks, pension funds, universities, really, to help and profit, to help it and profit from Israel's maintenance of the unlawful occupation. Now, this occupation has also turned into genocidal over the past 688 days, and I've denounced it. I've said, how come that many Israelis were becoming poorer and poorer, and the Israeli stock exchange kept on going up? Because of that, I've been sanctioned, which is something unprecedented that no states in 80 years of life of the United Nations have ever attempted, have ever dared, because it's a violation of international law, of the UN Charter, of the Convention on Privileges and Immunities. And still, the United Nations and the United States maintains the sanction, which are now entering the second month. It's abominable, and this is the situation. But do you understand? Against a person who has just written a report, I have been called a threat to global economy. It's clear that I've hit a nerve, but this is not the way to react to this.
I want to turn to the last story that the Reuters cameraman Hussam al-Masri filmed before he was killed by Israel on Monday. at Nasser Hospital. On Saturday, just 2 days before, al-Masri shot this interview with Hikmat Fojo, a Palestinian woman whose relatives were killed in another Israeli strike.
While they were sleeping, they were hit by missiles. While they were sleeping, an entire family was lost, and he was praying. He was praying. He was praying. His children were gone. 2 were martyred. They were born after 10 years of waiting. 1 was sleeping, and the woman's hands and legs. But God willing, it's all right. God willing. It doesn't matter. If my nephew's hand remains amputated, it doesn't matter. But may he stay alive, O Lord.
So that was one of the last pieces of video that the Palestinian journalist, the Reuters journalist, Hussam al-Masri filmed before he was killed Monday in that double tap strike. He had apparently was setting up a live stream at the 4th floor balcony, which journalists used when he was hit. So now I want to go to Reuters reporter Steve Holland, who questioned President Trump about this in the Oval Office.
If we could get your reaction, sir. The Israelis bombed a hospital in Gaza that killed 20 people, including 5 journalists.
When did this happen?
This happened overnight, today.
I didn't know that. No.
Any reaction to this? Are you
Well,
going
I'm
to
not
talk
happy
to Prime
about it.
Minister?
I don't want to see it. At the same time, we have to end that whole nightmare. I'm the one that got the hostages out. I got them out, all of them.
That was President Trump. Francesca Albanese, can you talk about the responsibility of the United States and tell us more about the mechanisms at the UN, since it's very clear they block any kind of action at the UN Security Council?
Yeah, as I said, there are clear instructions from International Court of Justice on how to deal with the situation. The only lawful thing that Israel can do in the occupied Palestinian territory is to withdraw the troops, dismantle the settlements, stop exploiting Palestinian resources. In the face of this, any aid, any support, any exchange of commerce, military intelligence, and others from the United States or others is a breach of the obligation not to render aid and assistance in maintaining the situation. However, on top of this, there are proceedings for genocide pending before the International Court of Justice, which trigger an obligation to prevent, which as a minimum, as the ICJ has said in the case of Nicaragua versus Germany, entails the ban on transfer of weapons to a country, to a state which is committing violations of international humanitarian law, meaning even war crimes. You know, we don't even need to go and bother the Genocide Convention. So yet again, another layer of responsibility of the United States. And then there are proceedings against Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity, including starvation. Because of this, even if the United States is not a party to the ICC, it should be respectful of international law, international criminal law, and instead of receiving the ICC wanted Netanyahu as if it was really a war hero as it's been defined, the United States should facilitate justice and accountability. Instead, they are waging a war against the ICC itself, not just me. All the judges of the ICC have been sanctioned, and so the prosecutor of the court. So this is the situation. Of course, there are complicities on the side of this administration, and in my opinion, even on the previous one. But this is something that belongs to the American people. It's the American people that need to, and the American political landscape that needs to take action on this.
And Francesca Albanese, I wanted to ask you, in a few weeks, the annual meeting of the UN General Assembly will take place. Leaders from all over the world will come and give speeches to the UN General Assembly. Do you think this is a defining moment for the United Nations as an institution, and its inability of the member states, or the unwillingness of the member states to stop a genocide that the entire world has been witnessing now for 2 years?
Yeah, I will take the opportunity to also answer the other part of Emmy's question, which I dropped. But it's yeah, I think that it's an historical moment, the one we live in, and it's a defining one. We will not get out of this genocide with the same pretense of innocence that we had when we entered. The crimes of Israel against the Palestinians were already 56 plus years old when the assault against Gaza on after the terrible day that October 7 was, and there is no question about that. So there had been a tolerance of Israel's impunity for decades. However, the United States is the single most important factor of crisis in the United Nations system at the moment, because the United Nations are clearly paralyzed in the face of a crisis which is political, legal, and humanitarian. And the United States have contributed to that paralysis by also, for example, what are the mechanisms to impose the sanctions or to dispose of coercive or non-coercive measures against Israel within the UN would be through the Security Council. And the United States have firmly and steadily sheltered Israel from most important instances of accountability. A rare exception is the 2016 Security Council resolution that recognized the legality of the settlements under international law. So it's a catch-22 situation. But at the same time, I want to remind everyone that the international community is constituted by 193 member states, and the other 191 that are not part of the Gaza genocide as much as Israel and the United States should do the utmost, not only to stop the genocide, but also to salvage what remains of the multilateral system, because so far it has protected, I wouldn't say all of us, but most of us, especially in the West, and it seems that we are really giving it for granted, but we will miss human rights very much when we don't have them anymore.
Francesca Albanese, the International Criminal Court has said it deplores new U.S. sanctions on its judges and prosecutors. Last week, the U.S. State Department announced new sanctions on 2 judges and 2 prosecutors in the ICC for engaging in efforts to prosecute U.S. and Israeli citizens. The ICC statement said, "These sanctions are a flagrant attack against the independence of an impartial judicial institution which operates under the mandate from 125 state parties from all regions. They constitute also an affront against the court's state parties, the rules-based international order, and above all, millions of innocent victims across the world." I'm wondering if you can comment on this latest development, the sanctions against the ICC prosecutors and judges, and also your own situation. You are the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory, and the U.S. has sanctioned you. And if you can talk exactly about what that means.
Look, the sanctions are a very heavy and, frankly, an awful instrument when directed at people whose job and whose efforts are in the pursuit of justice and accountability. So look at the absurdity of using an instrument which is meant to protect U.S. interests and U.S. citizens being used to punish people who are trying to stop and make people responsible for crimes accountable. Where is the harm to the U.S. citizens? What is harmed, and this is why I often say these sanctions are a sign of fragility of those who use them. I mean, what's the harm that is done to the American interest other than to the illegality that is denounced? Yes, the special rapporteur has put on notice 48 businesses And what? Why didn't they defend themselves? Why didn't they interact with me? Most of them, surely the American companies. Why did I went to complain to the American administration, who put me on notice not to continue this investigation already in May? Again, look, I come from a place which has been plagued by mafia-style logics, techniques, and I'm fully familiar with this way of behaving. And this kind of threats win only if they meet fear. But the people united must resist this. And this is why I'm not going to step back and I'm not going to stop my work.
And I wanted to ask a final question about the West Bank. As we went to air, I think something like 24 people have been injured in Ramallah in an Israeli military raid. This is not Gaza. This is Ramallah. At the same time, you have the far-right ministers talking about starting to annex the West Bank this week. What does this mean, and what role does the UN have in this?
Yes, two things. First, when we say this is not Gaza, last week, the Israeli newspaper 972 Local Call issued a report based on a leaked document by the Israeli army, which admitted that only one of 6 of the people killed in Gaza were Hamas combatants. And I want to underscore that Israel's definition of combatant is much broader than what is in fact afforded by international law. So it confirms and actually aggravates the accusations of the UN, independent experts and others that the death toll has steadily been at least 70% women and children, and therefore civilians. So they are saying that in fact 80% plus of the death toll in Gaza is made of civilians. The situation is not different from the West Bank, where Israel is advancing its ethnic cleansing agenda through annexation. This is not new. In February 2023, the coalition government passed an agreement that basically transferred to Bezalel Smotrich, so the Minister of Finance, control over large swathes of the West Bank. This was yet another act of annexation, but formalizing what Israel has been doing for 57 years, creating settlements, which are a war crime in occupied territories for Israeli Jews only, that were on stolen land and were resulting in dispossession and forcible displacement of Palestinians. Of course, today, this has reached abysmal proportion because there is even that veneer of respect of international humanitarian law has gone. There are settlers and soldiers ravaging the West Bank, and the Jordan Valley is unprotected other than by a few Israeli activists who go there night and day and trying to protect shepherds and pastoralist communities. But look, the situation is abominable. And now the state of Palestine has requested an intervention from the international community. Some authorities, like the Irish president, has called for a military intervention. And I understand that everything must pass in accordance with international law through the Security Council. And at the same time, because Israel has no sovereignty whatsoever over Gaza, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, it's about time that the deployment of a protection presence is considered, because there is no other way to stop what Israel is doing.
Francesca Albanese, I want to thank you for being with us, UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.